There's been rumblings around Beckett Sennecke. Is he worth a top 5 pick? We'll look at that on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, joined by Sebastian High, Head Scout and Director of European Scouting for Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, the Prospect Spotlight is on Beckett Sennecke. We'll look at his whole profile. We'll start off with the puck skills and the profile overall, the skating, the physicality. In our second segment, we'll look at the more intricate stuff, the habits, decision-making, and toolkit. And then in our third segment, we'll look at the projection with Beckett Sennecke and which team would be the best fit for him at the 2024 NHL Draft. But before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away here with a profile for Beckett Sennecke. Talk me through the size, handedness, and what type of game he plays.
Yeah, so Beckett Sennecke is a 6'2", 181-pound right shot right winger who plays for the Oshawa Generals in the OHL. Through 63 games in the regular season, he scored 27 goals and 68 points, so just a shade over a point a game in the regular season. But he's really ramped up his play offensively in the postseason, where Oshawa has been going on a very nice run. Through 16 games at the moment, he has scored 10 goals and 22 points, being a real offensive driver for that Generals lineup. And the style of play is a really interesting one for Beckett Sennecke. He is a high-end puck handler, and there are like the highlight reel is chock full of really tremendous sequences of him dissecting defensive structures, getting the puck from the neutral zone or even the defensive zone and rushing it all the way down to the net front and burying a goal off the rush. But he's shown some flashes of a power game, but there's still a real wonkiness in his game. He's grown about 5 inches in the last year and a half, and that's very notable in the way he skates specifically. It's also carries over into like the other elements of his game, but it's most notable in the skating, where it really affects his agility and balance specifically. And we'll get a bit more into that later on in this segment. But to start off with the puck skills, these are some aspects of his game that are really quite strong. But we'll start off with the puck handling, because at its brightest, it is a game-breaking tool, right?
Absolutely. His puck handling ability is ridiculous when he gets going. So the thing is with Sennecke is he's an improviser. He doesn't head into plays with a plan. That's good and bad, because it makes him unpredictable to his teammates, but also makes him unpredictable to his opponents. So in ways you just don't really know what Seneca is going to do when he gets the puck. He can handle through guys with really strong puck skills. He's got a really soft touch and can get around. He can get around stick checks and body checks fairly comfortably, especially at the OHL level. He's got that unlocked top hand. He's able to handle the puck either out wide, close to his body, in front of him, you name it. He's got a bunch of different ways to beat defenders. He's got a wide arsenal of puck skills as well in terms of his stick handling ability. He can go between the legs. He can go forehand, backhand, forehand. He can stop up and then accelerate. So there's some decent elements to it in terms of his ability to beat players one-on-one, two-on-one, that kind of stuff. And again, he's really creative, so his improvisation does benefit him at times, and that's what's made him kind of a player who's all over boards, both at the NHL level and at the public level. But in terms of the shot as well, I think it's above average as well. I'd give it a 5.5, 6th grade, whereas the stick handling is a real standout, 7.5. The shot isn't bad either. He's able to beat goaltenders from outside of the slot, around the hash marks. He's able to take shots off and release them pretty accurately. He's got a good one-timer, and I've especially liked his ability to shoot through screens. It blends really well with his stick handling ability because the defenseman needs to respect the fact that he could stick handle past them. So they'll usually match footwork with him and stay in front of him. So he's able to just toe drag and release through a pair of legs without a problem. So that's been something that's made him really effective at the OHL level. It's not the most wildly accurate or powerful shot, but it's enough to beat goaltenders from out wide. It's enough to beat goaltenders from the slot, and he finds that space really well as well. But the passing ability is pretty interesting as well, right? He's not just a shooter and handler.
It certainly is. I think it would be like around like a 5.5 or 6 grade as well. Like the puck skills as a whole, grade out as above average very consistently. The consistency within his application of those tools, that's where we have some more questions. But we'll dig into that a bit more in the next segment. But yeah, the playmaking game is a strength, and especially because he is so creative. And while yes, he is unpredictable, and there are often times where his teammates struggle to read him and play off of him, when they are in sync, there really is potential for some fantastic offensive sequences. And he uses his stick handling really well, as you mentioned, to create space for himself, to get past defenders. And when he is in a pocket of space, he scans quite consistently, in my viewings at least offensively, for that support of teammates. And when he sees a teammate, he can hit them with a pretty accurate pass on a consistent basis. I'd like to see him be able to use his array of playmaking tools on a more consistently. Like he can use hook passes really well. I've seen him use slip passes quite effectively as well. But there are also like there are entire like 2 or 3 game stretches where he barely uses them. So using those tools more consistently is certainly a work in progress with Seneca. But the baseline capability of executing those plays is already there.
Yeah, Seneca's a ton of fun, really. Like that's the word to describe him. He's an enjoyable, fun player. There's a lack of projectability, and we'll get into that in a sec. But I do want to highlight the skating as well because that's another part of his game that's kind of impacted by the fact that he's grown so much in such a small span of time. He's still very uncoordinated. Like his feet and his eyes aren't at the same level. So sometimes, he reminds me a bit of kind of the early years of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, where he's skating and he's trying things, but he'll fall on his knees and struggle to get up quickly enough to do something with it. But falling to start with is the issue, right? But beyond that, I mean, the speed buildup isn't bad. The acceleration and the top speed aren't bad. The issue is the agility and the balance. His agility mainly goes through his hands, not his feet. He changes the location of the puck quickly enough that it seems as if he's more agile than he is. But when you focus on his feet and what they're doing, there's a distinct lack of lateral agility, of ability to separate quickly from opponents. But beyond that, like I mentioned, the balance is a big issue. He's still not coordinated enough to stay on his feet the whole time he's going through a deke sequence or a transition sequence, right? So that's one issue that I would point out with his skating ability. But again, the speed is not bad. And the acceleration isn't bad. So I'd give his skating 5, really. Because again, like once he gets going, he's really hard to stop because of that handling skill and that top speed. He can get around, especially OHL defenders, fairly easily. Now, once he gets to the NHL and defensemen are more mobile, more laterally agile, more capable of skating backwards at top speeds and keep up with them, that's going to be a bit more of an issue, and that's going to be an adaptation period for him for sure. But so far, it's really not a problem. So I'd put it down as a 5. And the physicality is a big element. I think his physicality is really, really good. He's a player who goes into board battles and knows how to initiate contact, and he does it proactively. He actually invites contact. He positions his body in a way where he'll bait a defender into kind of going for the shoulder, and then he'll reverse into him, and that'll create enough separation to make a play with the puck. I think that's going to be kind of the separating factor that could make him a really, really strong second liner, is that this is a player who, despite his lack of balance, is the way he invites pressure, the way he invites physicality is so interesting. And I think that's a big part in what will make him effective at the NHL level. But that's our first segment. We have a lot to talk about in our second, including the defensive game, which I think is one of Seneca's biggest strengths. We'll get into the toolkit, the habits, and the decision making in just a second. But before we get into that, a quick word from our sponsors at Indeed. If you're looking to hire, Indeed is the hiring platform where you can get it done effectively and well. Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place, which makes the hiring process extremely easy. It makes it effortless, even. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must have requirements, or else you don't pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites looking to find the right candidates with the right skills, you have one hiring partner that does it all for you. One of the things I love about Indeed, I got my job through Indeed, my day job, and it made it super easy because I knew exactly what the job offered and I knew how it matched with what my skill set is. And that combination of, kind of helping you find the right job with the right skill sets, and the employer themselves making it really clear what they want in terms of what they want from their employees, makes it really easy to find a job that gels with you and helps you. I mean, I've been at this job for the longest time. I've kept this job really well. So this is a hiring partner that really, really works. And Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest's evaluation of them in 2019. So start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at indeed.com/locked on. This offer is valid for a limited time, so check it out really soon. Again, it's indeed.com/locked on for a $75 credit. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Alrighty, so moving on to Beckett Sennecke's Toolkit, Habits, and Decision Making, and I think this is a part of his game where there are some really clear positives and some really clear negatives. Let's start with the toolkit because I think that's where we both have major questions, right? The combination of skating and handling isn't always all there. His hands are kind of almost sometimes too polished or too quick for his own feet. So talk me through that divergence and what goes on with the kind of separation there is between his hands and feet there.
For sure. I think a lot of it comes down to what we already pointed out in the first segment, and it is like those question marks we have around the agility and balance, and them being a real step below, especially the handling ability with Beckett Sennecke, which is already like probably like top 10 at least, at the very least, in this draft class among puck handling tool grades, and the agility and balance just can't keep up with it. And there's a very clear struggle with him in terms of some games, like the puck handling shines extremely brightly because he's able to compensate for that lack of agility by continuously keeping the puck away from defenders, by utilizing his long reach, his physicality, his handling ability, and that speed buildup when he loads up in like the defensive zone or the neutral zone and bombs up the ice. Agility and balance isn't as big of an issue, especially at the OHL level, because he has that speed that he can blow past defenders. He doesn't need to integrate that lateral mobility in a really fluid manner, and the puck and the handling keeps up very easily at that high pace. But when the game is a bit slower, when he's not hitting those high speeds, that's when it's a lot more clear that there's a clear gap between those two toolkits. So I definitely agree with you. I think that the layering between the feet and the hands has been a clear area of question throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me with Seneca as well is the shot and the hands blend really well. The shot and the feet, again, another issue. But I do want to highlight the positives on that side. Is like I said, because he's so unpredictable and so capable of driving around defenders, especially in transition, it makes him really effective at curl and dragging through feet and shooting through screens. That's a big part of his game that I've really, really liked in my viewings. Beyond that, I think that in terms of habits, the defensive habits with him are really, really good. He back checks hard. He puts in efforts really well. He's really good on retrievals, both defensively and offensively, which helps him keep the puck on his team's stick. And once he gets the puck, he's really good at finding an outlet really quickly. So I think the feet being the main issue gives me some promise because the brain is there. I mean, he thinks the game at a really good level and has a lot of habits that work really well. I mentioned already the ability when it comes to physicality, when it comes to initiating and inviting contact along the boards to create separation. That's a habits thing. That's a part of your game that you develop mentally more than physically. You need the physical tools so that it works, but the fact that you're doing it is a habitual thing rather than a skill thing. So that's a big part of the habits with Seneca that I really like. Like I mentioned, the back checking is both intense and purposeful. He's a player who identifies his checks really well, who identifies secondary and tertiary threats really well. Kind of gets in the right lanes, makes the right plays defensively, is just constantly involved in helping his team get pucks back. There's such a big contrast between his approach to the defensive game and like Cole Eiserman's, which is just, there's a big difference in effort, and you can see it very, very well. But in terms of decision making, there's a lot to like here with Seneca, right? Like, even if he's improvising a lot of things, there's still, like, when he does decide on a thing, it's a pretty good thing to decide on, right?
It certainly is. And the one element that I really like about his improvisational, like on puck game that he's been especially showing off in this playoff run, it's been just constantly on display here for Oshawa. It's that he's been able to showcase how quickly he processes the game. He has really good scanning habits on puck. He makes a bit of a mental map on the ice to locate defenders and teammates, and he consistently makes good choices in terms of the selection of lanes, in terms of faking one way in order to open up a different lane very deliberately. And yeah, I think that he's a very intelligent player. And when you pair that level of intelligence with all of these physical tools and the fact that he has so much runway, because he does remain so raw in like the level of agility and balance, but also the consistency with which he's been able to execute a lot of the high end plays he tries, because he is so creative. There are many mistakes in his game, and there are turnovers that he causes, but because of that, and because he is so intelligent and he has that basis of sound both on and off puck habits and offensive and defensive implication, and the desire to use teammates to incrementally build up play, I think that this is a very bright prospect who, I currently have him ranked 16th overall. So while we have seen a bit of discussion around him in that top 10, maybe even top 5 range from a certain organization in the NHL, I do think that like the top 15 range is certainly within the conversation for this player.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to highlight something regarding Seneca's decision making specifically, because he's not proactive. He's very, very much reactive. Like we said, he improvises a lot, but that's the decision making thing, because he's really good at deciding on plays on the fly, but he's putting himself in those situations. He's not putting himself in situations where he has a plan, where he's thinking proactively and anticipating the next threat and kind of thinking ahead. I want to see more of that. It's really great to be a great improviser, and a lot of great improvisers make the NHL, but those same great improvisers are able to anticipate, are able to predict, are able to think ahead and be proactive. So I'm still waiting to see that from Seneca, and that's the main thing for me. That, we'll get into that more in just a second, but that's the thing that personally for me, I wouldn't take Seneca with a top 5 pick. There are too many question marks and too much muddiness in his projection to kind of go ahead with that. But that's the thing for me specifically that is giving me pause and allowing me to question a tiny bit, where he ends up in the draft. Because if he figures that out, if he learns to anticipate and pre-plan, like, his puck skills are good enough in order to be a really good top sixer. But that's a big question. It's a big if. And for a player who consistently puts himself in situations where he doesn't have to or can't be proactive, what's the path ahead? Like, that's a developmental thing as well, is what's the path for him to be able to anticipate, to develop that anticipation and proactiveness, because he doesn't have those opportunities. He doesn't put himself in situations where he can. It's not like Caden Lindstrom, for example, who his main issue is decision making and habits and all that stuff. He's still very raw, but because he's getting so many puck touches, he's seeing a lot of scenarios where he can explore and develop this stuff. Seneca isn't seeing those scenarios, so that's a big question for me. But we'll get into that more in detail in just a second. We'll look at Beckett Senneca's projection, his NHL team fit, and whether or not he's worth a top 5 pick more in detail in just a second, just before a quick word from our sponsors, FanDuel.
It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 that you can bet on spreads, money lines, player props, same game parlays, and far more. And I'm always a really big fan of same game parlays because they make the action all the more exciting, and that is never more true than when you're attending an event live. Just select a couple hand-picked stats to swing on and make the action all the more exciting. Visit fanduel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our projection of Beckett Sennecke. Which team would be the best fit, and is he worth a top 5 pick? Let's start off by naming the team that has him supposedly top 5. Bob McKenzie put out rankings recently and highlighted where players were ranked according to the scouts he spoke to. Beckett Sennecke had one top 5 pick, a couple top 10 picks, mostly top 15 picks. And according to a lot of reports, Beckett Sennecke is on Montreal's top 5 list, and Montreal has a 5th overall pick. So depending on how the top 5 plays out, Beckett Sennecke might be their pick. Is he worth that? I think we can both answer this question with a resounding no, even though we're big fans of Beckett Sennecke's game, right?
Yeah, as we mentioned, there are still a lot of question marks in terms of his projection because there are still quite a few theoretical elements where we're hoping he can grow and improve elements of his game to get to that high end, potentially complementary top line role eventually. But on top of that, he's not going to be an offensive driver on a top line. I don't personally see that upside. I don't think you do either, but we're likely talking about a really fun and dynamic top 6 piece, which is likely going to be on a second line in terms of the comfortable realm for a contending team if he really hits his upside. And that's a little bit rich for me at 5th overall, personally. But that said, because he is so raw and because he has been able to show such bright flashes and he has grown 5 inches in the last year and a half, and he is still adjusting to being a bit wonky, and we can expect and hope for a bit of an upward trajectory in his development next season. I can see maybe that like late end of the top 10 being like a swing that could be taken theoretically, but top 5 is bullish.
Yeah, for sure. What I would say, I have a warning, which is a comparison. And I'll bring it up right now. Remember Owen Pickering? Owen Pickering, who grew 7 inches in a year
Precisely.
and
Yeah.
was really wonky and had a lot of really bright flashes of skill. We're talking about a left-handed defenseman who was picked by Pittsburgh, by the way. Obviously, different position, different player, different circumstances, but the idea remains the same. Owen Pickering hasn't figured it out yet. The thing with players who grow a lot in a short amount of time is that it's not just getting used to your size. It's reworking your game pretty much entirely around that newfound size and physicality. Owen Pickering wasn't able to figure out that, at least hasn't so far. And it might take him even longer to figure it out since he's a defenseman, but the idea remains the same. Beckett Sennecke growing a lot in the past year isn't necessarily a positive thing. It means that he has to rework his whole game. And in order to be effective, he's going to have to rework his whole game. But beyond that, even if he does rework his whole game properly and ends up hitting his upside as a true second line play driver, there are 4, maybe 5 forwards in this class that have the upside of being a top line play driver that Sennecke doesn't really have. So even though Sennecke is a fairly interesting, very fun prospect. For me, the fact that there are 4 or 5 forwards who have higher upside than he does in terms of pure upside, in terms of being, that true top line complement, that true top line driver. I'm talking obviously about Macklin Celebrini, Ivan Demidov, Caden Lindstrom, Tija Ginla, Berkeley Catton, even maybe Trevor Conley. I mean, that's 6 guys that have top line upside that Sennecke doesn't have. So for me, obviously this is all theoretical. We can't guarantee that Seneca is not going to become a top line player, but it's a real outside shot. And even if he makes it, like you said, it's probably going to be in a complementary role rather than a true play driving role. So I have big questions regarding Seneca being a top 5 pick. I don't think he's a top 6 forward in terms of upside. But I definitely see him as a 12 to 20 pick, 100%. Like if you have a pick in that range, he's your guy. And speaking of which team would be the best fit for Seneca?
I think the San Jose Sharks would be very interesting. They have a need for added physicality and defensive implication, and they love their slick, high-end puck handling forwards, and Beckett Sennecke fits that mold fantastically. And they have the 14th overall selection, which they got from Pittsburgh Penguins, which fits perfectly right in that range.
Absolutely. By the way, I completely forgot about mentioning Cole Eiserman in that list of forwards. So that's 7
I
forwards.
figured.
Yeah, I completely blanked on Eiserman, but yeah, that's 7 forwards who I'd say have top line upside, like true top line upside, even if it's an outside shot. So yeah, I'd say 12 to 20 is the right pick. And in that, San Jose, I mean, that's a great fit, especially with their selection of Kasper Haltonen last year. I think he's kind of in the same mold of maybe less of a shooter, maybe less of a pure goal scorer, but the same element of kind of being this big body, still figuring out his size, who's still figuring out the fact of being proactive, but a player who's really good at improvising and finding space and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think Seneca would be a great fit, especially with their young centers. You know, they have William Eklund, they have Will Smith coming up. They've got players who they can gel with Beckett Sennecke and can make a really good kind of top 6 winger. Beyond that, I think that, you know, if the Chicago Blackhawks can pick him up as well, I think that'd be a great addition to their pool. Obviously not at second or third overall, or like definitely not in that range, but if they can add another pick, maybe trade up, that kind of stuff, great option for them.
They
And
have
yeah, I
20th
mean, there's a
overall.
couple. They do have 20th overall. I don't think he slips that far with the amount of teams that have him in their top 5, top 10, top 15. I'd be surprised. But if you want to trade up to get him, I think he'd be a great fit for the players that they have in their system, especially if they can add Ivan Demidov in the first with their first pick. A first line of Demidov, Bedard, and Seneca, I think is a great combination of skills. You've got that defensively responsible, physical, and also skillful element in Seneca, combined with the pure offensive driving of Demidov and Bedard. When we're saying he could be a potential top line complementary player, that's what we mean. Is a perfect fit for a guy like Bedard or Demidov. So I think, yeah, you get the. I think that Columbus would be great. San Jose would be great. But outside of the lottery picks, if we're looking at a bubble contender, a team like, I don't know, the Nashville Predators, I think he'd be a great fit for them, right?
Yeah, I mean, Nashville has been taking those swings on upside, especially since Barry Trotz took over as general manager. So last year they spent their 2 first-round draft picks on Matthew Wood and Tanner Melendick, and those are 2 very big swings on raw upside there. And I think Beckett Sennecke fits that mold brilliantly. They pick at 22nd overall, so a little bit lower than where he likely will go, but apparently Nashville was very bullish in terms of trying to trade up at the draft last year, even into the top 5. So trading up like 5 or 6 slots to get a guy they really like, and Beckett Sennecke certainly fits the mold of what they would respect and really want to add into their system. I could see that happening for sure.
100%. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports on a 24/7 news channel over on YouTube. And make sure to tune in for our future shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of May. This has been Hadi Kalikesh, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, with Sebastian, Head Scout, and Director of European Scouting for Dobber Prospects. And we hope to see you next time.